So, C. Finlay is the author of The Patriot, which it's a book, first in a series of 3. It's about the Revolutionary War, and sort of a what if magic were real, which it is, right? And if it were being used around the time of the Revolutionary War. So I'm going to read a selection from this, probably maybe a first chapter or something like that, violating copyright with impunity, really. I'm looking forward to it. DeSanti. You're kind of required to do that at Ohio State since Coke owns DeSanti. DeSanti. Anyway, God forbid you try to buy a Pepsi. Oh, I forgot. This is going out over the air. We'll take that out. Anyway, it's about a young man learning that he has magical powers, a man named Proctor Brown. So here we go. Chapter 1, April 1775. Proctor Brown stopped in the middle of bustling King Street, close enough to Boston's Long Wharf to smell the fishing boats, and wished he hadn't worn his best linen jacket. He rolled his shoulders to loosen the fit, but it still felt too tight. His mother had given him the linen jacket 2 years ago for his 18th birthday, and he'd already outgrown it. Taking over all the work on the farm hadn't made his shoulders any smaller. The elegantly lettered sign of the British Coffee House swayed over him, above the door of the narrow bay-windowed building squeezed between aged storefronts. Emily Ruck waited inside. He would be excited to see Emily again, except her father was going to be there too. It figured. The first time he was to meet Emily's father, and he would show up in a jacket that was 2 years too small. A fine impression that was going to make. He tugged the sleeves down one last time and stepped resolutely toward the door. A rattling cart loaded with barrels of molasses careened toward him, and Proctor jumped out of the way to keep his feet from being crushed by the wheels. His elbows bumped into somebody behind him. "I beg your pardon," Proctor began to say as he turned. A bright flash cut off Proctor's sentence and made him avert his eyes. When he blinked them clear, 4 men in the red coats of the British Marines blocked his way, 2 bullies and 2 officers. The senior officer glared at Proctor. The flash had come from something at his throat, but the light faded, and Proctor no longer saw it. The Marines snickered, mistaking Proctor's averted eyes for fear. The largest one loomed over Proctor, shoved him. "Watch where you're goin', and watch your manners," he said in a thick Scots accent. Clearly, I cannot do a thick Scots accent. Proctor's urge to strike back surprised him by its violence, but he mastered the feeling in an instant, not wanting to ruin his best jacket before meeting Emily's father. He lifted his head and met the big Scot's eyes. "Come, be good fellows now," the senior officer said, his accent similar but not as strong. There was no harm done. The Marines brushed past Proctor as if he were nothing. Proctor stared at the senior officer's back. The light at the man's throat had faded as suddenly as it had flashed. Proctor couldn't even say what he'd seen, as there was nothing unusual about the officer's uniform or its embellishments. As they entered the coffee house, he saw Emily wave to him through the panes of the window. She shimmered like a mirage through the uneven glass. A similar ripple rolled through his stomach when he returned the greeting. He tugged at his collar, which felt tight as his jacket. Meeting Emily's father couldn't be any worse than dealing with his own mother, could it? He stepped up to the entrance and pulled on the handle. The door opened onto laughter and clackering crockery and the scent of pipe tobacco. Dozens of chairs and benches crowded the long, narrow building, with brass candlesticks on every table, though only a few of them were lit. The walls were bare, not that you could see much of them with all the people gathered, a variety of British officers, periwigged officials, and ambitious merchants, all talking over one another. 2 black slaves, one laden with cups, the other with platters, ran from table to table. The British Marines Proctor had bumped into moved into the back of the room. Emily sat at a table up front. She had arranged her cap so that her black curls spilled out of it. The yellow silk ribbon in the back matched the piece she had given Proctor as a keepsake. He reached into his pocket and brushed it with his thumb. Although she sat with her hands folded delicately in her lap, her large eyes were bright and mischievous. Proctor couldn't help himself and grinned back at her. The man sitting at the table rose and cleared his throat. Thomas Ruck, sugar merchant, Emily's father. The resemblance was remarkable for the way it was transmuted in her own features. Her black hair matched his in color, but her curls were his unruly tangle. Her round face became jowls and a second chin, and her pink cheeks reddened into his veins and sunburn. Emily's butter-colored silk dress was even outmatched by her father's sumptuously tailored jacket and ornate lace cuffs. Ruck's thick eyebrows curved down in disapproval that mimicked the shape of his mouth. "Emily," he said, "you didn't tell me that you planned to introduce me to a mute." Emily's eyes flushed. Proctor tore off his hat and stepped forward, offering his hand. "I'm sorry, sir. My name is Proctor Brown. Yes, I know. I've heard entirely too much about you already." Ruck ignored the offer of a hand and sat down impatiently, waving his plump fingers at Proctor to take the third seat. "Let's get this over with." Proctor bumped the chair against the table, shaking the candelabra as he sat. "It's good to see you again, Mr. Brown," Emily said, more formally than Proctor had ever heard her speak. "And you also, Miss Ruck," he replied, in the same tone with just a hint of mockery. He could see her suppress a grin. "I'll be blunt with you, Brown," Proctor said. His hands were spread flat on the table, and he stared at them as if he had a point of argument for every finger. "One of the reasons I sent my beloved Emily away from Boston to the more rural climate and estate in Lexington was that I wanted to remove her not only from the tumult and mobs of the city, from the precipitous actions of those pernicious Sons of Liberty, but also, with so many officers and other gentlemen about, from the temptation of liaisons that would be ill-advised because of her relative youth. But for 3 months now she's done nothing but talk about you until I finally agreed to arrange this dinner." Not exactly the cheerful welcome Proctor had hoped for. He spread his own hands on the table. "I'm flattered that she thinks so well of me, sir." "Daddy, I think once you get to know Proctor—" Ruck's stern look made Emily wilt under her bonnet and fall silent. Turning back to Proctor, he said, "You understand that it will be best if we get this all out in the open and put an immediate end to this unsuitable courtship." Proctor leaned forward and matched Ruck's expression. "Sir, I came down to Boston to visit my aunt and for the honor of meeting you. But for Emily's sake, I would have walked all the way to Georgia. I'm willing to undertake whatever is necessary to convince you of the seriousness of my intentions." Emily blushed again. Proctor would have given her a wink, but Ruck watched him carefully and directly, so he held the older man's gaze. After a moment, Ruck looked away, raised his hand, and shouted across the room, "Hannah!" An older woman made her way to the table, wiping her hands on her greasy apron. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ruck, and the young gentleman and the young lady," she said. "What may I bring you?" "What would you like to drink, dear?" Ruck asked his daughter. "Since this is the coffee house, I would dearly love to have a cup of coffee," said Emily brightly. "The young lady will have tea," Ruck grumbled. "Some Madeira for myself. What do you want, Brown?" "Beer. Pale ale, if they have it." Emily ducked her head. "As you wish, sir." "Beer?" Ruck sneered when she was gone. "That's a farmer's drink." "That might be because I'm a farmer," Proctor answered. Ruck glanced at Emily and then leaned forward. "Which is exactly my problem with his youthful fancy." "Daddy!" "No, I did not raise my daughter to become a farmer's wife." Turning to Proctor, he said, "Do you think a farmer could keep her in the manner to which she has been raised?" Proctor leaned forward in response. "Sir, she knows exactly how I live, and it doesn't seem to frighten her exactly." "Which is what I've already told him," Emily said. Ruck waved this off. "That's just the foolishness and inexperience of youth. Your farm would start to look very small to her, like a cage, Emily, with the passage of time." "Oh, it won't always be such a small farm, sir," Proctor said. Ruck leaned forward and studied Proctor again, as if there might be more to him than a too-small jacket. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "We've got more than 60 acres. With only the 3 of us there, my father, my mother, and myself, there's room to grow. Next year I'll buy 2 heifers for the pasture, and with the fields fallow most of these past 10 years, they'll yield a better harvest of corn to take them through the winter. The stand of trees at the back of the farm has been untouched for a long time, too. They're big enough now that I can cut them down and mill them for a new barn first, and then, in a few more years, a new house." "You can only get so far with 60 acres, boy, no matter how you use it," Ruck said, but he was interested. Proctor stole a glance at Emily, and she gave him a small, encouraging nod. "I plan to sell the beef here in Boston and save the money," Proctor said. "Old man Leary lives just over the hill, and his daughter's moved off to Connecticut. Once I've saved enough, he'll sell his farm to me and go live with them. Then I can rent out his house and expand my herd into his field. I'll be the richest farmer in Lincoln within 5 years." 10 years at the least with that plan," Ruck said. He leaned out of the way as Hannah returned with her drinks. Ruck told him to bring them plates of chicken and whatever else was fresh in the kitchen. Emily poured her tea, saying, "I'd much rather have a cup of coffee." "It's a foul liquid. The colonials would never drink it if it weren't for this nonsense over the tea stamps," Ruck said. He patted her hand. "Coffee is beneath you." Proctor sipped his beer and found it dark and bitter. Voices rose in argument behind him, chased by the scuff of feet and furniture. Proctor twisted in his seat to look, just in time to see a golden light flash so bright it made his head ache and his hand knot into a fist. The light faded the instant the scuffle broke up, and Proctor saw that it came from the same British officer he had encountered outside. "Do you know who that man is?" Proctor said. "That's Major Pitcairn, John Pitcairn," Ruck said, "one of the best officers we have in the colony. Completely and utterly fearless, would charge a line of bayonets with no more than a butter knife. His men love him. Why do you ask?" "We bumped into each other once," Proctor said absently. He could have sworn he'd seen a gold medallion flash at Pitcairn's neck, but when he peered close, there was nothing. The big Marine caught him staring, and Proctor glanced away. Ruck refilled his glass of wine. "You're thinking too small, Brown." Proctor was shaken out of his thoughts. "What do you mean?" "With the cattle," Ruck said. "Think bigger. Do you think Boston's a big town, Brown?" "Biggest I've ever seen, though I've heard Philadelphia's twice the size." Ruck laughed heartily. "Boston has 15, maybe 20,000 people, and that includes every jacktar who jumps off the boat to get drunk in the tavern. Now, London. London, she's a city. 700,000 people living there, Brown. You could drop Boston down whole in the London docks and not find it again for 3 days." Emily caught Proctor's attention and rolled her eyes. The greatness of London was one of her father's favorite topics. "You don't say, sir," Proctor said. "I do say. That's why these Sons of Liberties are spouting nonsense when they talk about breaking free from England. The world's a big place, but the empire makes it small. We're all part of one big English family, and we'll all profit more if we stand together.